Hello and welcome back, everyone. My name is Ricky Fraley. Today we'll be talking about the case of the roadside strangler, that is Michael Ross. Michael Ross was born in Putnam, Connecticut on July 26, 1959, to his parents Patricia Lane and Dan Ross. Michael was the eldest of four. He did have two younger sisters and one younger brother, and their family all resided on a chicken farm in Brooklyn, Connecticut. His home life and childhood are considered to be extremely dysfunctional. Court records state that Patricia and Dan only married due to Patricia becoming pregnant, and as a result, the two didn't really have that great of a relationship or marriage. Patricia was said to have hated farm life, and after having four children and an additional two children that she didn't carry to full term on purpose, she ran off to North Carolina to be with another man, abandoning her family. All her children were left there with Dan. Upon returning home, she would be institutionalized. The doctor that admitted Patricia would write that Patricia spoke of ending her life and beating or striking her children. Michael's sister would admit that her brother would take the brunt of their mother, Patricia's, anger. Close family and friends of the family have alleged that Michael was sexually abused by his teenage uncle. However, this was never able to be verified or disproven due to his uncle taking his own life when Michael was only 6 years old, and Michael himself saying that he couldn't remember any abuse of the sort throughout his childhood. After Michael's teenage uncle ended his own life, the job of killing sick or malformed chicks and chickens became the responsibility of then 8-year-old Michael. Michael, at 8 years old, chose to strangle the chickens with his bare hands, and as he got older, more of the farm responsibilities would eventually fall onto his shoulders. In fact, by the time he was in high school, his father leaned very heavily on Michael for his help, and Michael did love helping his father and farm life in general. So he went on to handle all of his responsibilities while attending high school, and he did quite well at both. He was able to balance school life and farm life at home exceedingly well, with no issues or complaints from either end or from Michael. However, friends and family noticed him exhibiting antisocial behavior from a very young age, likely stemming from the aforementioned alleged abuse at the hands of both his mother and his teenage cousin. It was at this time, as a teenager, when Michael was attending the unfortunately named Killingly High School, which was in Killingly, Connecticut, that he began to stalk young teenage girls. This would go on until he graduated from Killingly High School in 1977. Now, you see, Michael was a smart boy, smart teenager, and as such, after graduating high school, Ross would attend Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. Starting in fall of that year, 1977. He would study agricultural economics. Like I said, he also did enjoy the farm life very much. He began dating a young woman who was in ROTC, the Reserve Officer Training Corps, for whichever branch she was in. Army ROTC is the default, so I'm going to go with that one. And he told others that he dreamed of someday marrying her. The young woman became pregnant during the relationship, and subsequently she decided to terminate the pregnancy, and this would become the catalyst for the end of their relationship. The relationship would last until she graduated from ROTC, and the way that works is when you graduate ROTC, you become an officer in the military for whichever branches ROTC you were in, whether it's the Marines, the Navy, the Army, or the Air Force. So, at the beginning, there's like a mandatory term you have to do. I believe it's 4 years. She had a 4-year service commitment, after those 4 years were done as an officer, she could resign or she could keep going. But she had to serve 4 years right off the bat for graduating and becoming an officer. The relationship came to an end because of this, because she would commission as an officer and leave. Michael admitted that once the relationship became more troubled after the termination and her advancing in her ROTC responsibilities, he began to have sexually violent fantasies and began stalking women in his sophomore year at college. These fantasies began to consume Michael until eventually he committed his first sexual assault in that same sophomore year, and then an assault and homicide by strangulation in his senior year before graduating from Cornell in May of 1981. Michael would recall later that he hated himself for what he had done, and he tried to end his own life, but lacked the actual courage to do so, and instead he just promised himself that he would never hurt anyone again. This promise, as I know, and as you probably know, thus being this far into the video, this promise was broken. Upon graduating from Cornell, he became an insurance salesman and would go on to assault and kill more young women between 1981, which was when his first one was at Cornell, and 1984, which is when he got caught. So, moving on to the victims here. That's enough about the man, the monster who did this. The victims, who I like to emphasize here, are the real reason why I'm doing the story. They're the ones who matter, not him. And forgive me for this first name. I don't speak this language. It'll be on screen right here. It's Zongnoktu. If I mispronounce that, I am deeply sorry. But Zongnoktu was a 25-year-old Cornell University student, believed to be Michael's first victim. She was assaulted and her life was ended on May 12th of 1981. Tammy Williams, who was 17 of Brooklyn, Connecticut, was assaulted and killed on January 5th of 1982. Paula Pereira, who was 16 of Wallkill, New York, was sexually assaulted and killed in March of 1982. Her exact date of death is unknown. We just know that it happened sometime in March, so about 2 months after Tammy Williams, back on January 5th of that year. Deborah Smith Taylor, 23 of Griswold, Connecticut, June 15th, 1982. So about 2 to 3 months after Paula Pereira. Robin Dawn Stavinsky, 19 of Norwich, Connecticut, was accosted by Michael on the grounds of a state hospital in Norwich. He forcefully pulled Robin into a wooded area and ordered her to remove her clothing. He would then assault her, and after which he ordered her to turn over onto her stomach, and he would then subsequently strangle her. He covered her body with leaves and left the crime scene. This took place on Thanksgiving Day in 1983. I don't know exactly what date that was. I'd have to go back and look it up, but the end of November in 1983. Next are April Brunei and Leslie Shelley. Both of them were 14 and from Griswold, Connecticut. They were picked up by Michael after hitchhiking on Route 138 on April 22nd of 1984. After picking them up, he would drive past their intended destination, despite protests from both girls. When April tried to force Michael to stop the car, using a knife and threatening him with it, smart girl, unfortunately he did disarm her and continued on to Rhode Island. At Beach Pond, he would park his car and bind both girls' hands and feet. He then untied April's feet, forcing her to walk a short distance from the car where he would assault her, turn her on her stomach, and strangle her to death. Once he returned to the car, he would kill Leslie. She, Leslie, became his only murder victim that was not also assaulted in that manner. He then placed both bodies in his car, drove back to Preston, Connecticut, and would dispose of both girls' bodies in a culvert. Wendy Barabalt, 17, of Griswold, Connecticut, was his final victim. She was accosted by Michael as she was walking along Route 12 in Lisbon on June 13th, 1984. After a very short conversation, Michael would pull Wendy over a stone wall and force her to go with him into a wooded area. This wooded area, and the path that they took led into an open field, and he subsequently assaulted her and strangled her in the same manner as the others. After Wendy's murder, Michael Malchik was assigned as the chief investigator in 1984. Witnesses were able to provide Malchik with both the description of the car, which was a blue Toyota, and the description of the person responsible for her murder, that's Wendy's. Malchik began interviewing owners of blue Toyotas in the surrounding area, which would ultimately include Michael Ross. Malchik would later testify that during their initial meeting, Michael would drop subtle hints that he was the man that was responsible for the crimes. This enticed Malchik to interrogate him further. By this time, Michael himself was living in Jewett City, and his parents had divorced and sold their farm. Michael informed Malchik during the interview of his past 2 arrests on sexual offenses. This would prompt Malchik to bring him in for further questioning, and during the questioning, both men spoke as if they were longtime friends, discussing everything from family and girlfriends to just life in general. By the conclusion, Michael had confessed to the kidnapping, assault, and murder via strangulation of 8 young women, the eldest victim of which was 25. That would be his first victim. While searching Michael's residence, however, investigators noted that a slip cover from his apartment matched a cloth found in the woods in Exeter, Rhode Island, along with the ligature marks on the neck of one of the girls. This was enough evidence to bring him in and charge him. And during the trial, Michael did not deny any of the charges or allegations against him, as he'd already confessed to the killings. However, there was a lot of attention geared towards the judge who presided over the case, actually. Superior Court Judge Seymour Hendel exploded during the closed hearing as he accused prosecutors and police officers of purposely misleading the court with lies. This resulted in the suspension of several counts against Michael, along with the judge refusing to reopen suppression hearings on Michael's confession. When sealed records were opened 2 years later, Judge Hendel would end up retracting his statements. Nonetheless, Michael was convicted of the murders of just the last 4 of the 8 women that he confessed to having killed. And it took the jury only 86 minutes of deliberations to find him guilty and only 4 hours to determine his punishment. Michael Ross was thereby sentenced to death on July 26, 1987 by Judge G. Sarsfield Ford, and would spend almost 18 years on death row before his execution in May of 2005. Now, in 1995, while he was in prison, Michael appeared on a British television series about serial killers, and the filmmakers are the ones that are responsible for giving him the nickname the Roadside Strangler. This was because the killers featured on the series all had nicknames. Michael Ross was never actually named the Roadside Strangler by the Connecticut media or by any local law enforcement while he was alive, in stark contrast to other serial killers who normally get their names while they're active, or they give themselves their own names, like the Zodiac Killer or Jack the Ripper. They are examples of ones that gave themselves their own names, or people like the East Area Rapist, who became the Golden State Killer, or the Night Stalker, or any of them whose names were put on them by the media or the public in general. Michael Ross never had one of those. The Roadside Strangler was just assigned to him by this British television series. Michael would spend 18 years on death row, like I said, and during that time he would eventually meet a woman by the name of Susan Powers, who was from Oklahoma, and who he became engaged with to be married. Susan would end their relationship, however, in 2003, but continued to visit Michael up until his execution 2 years later in 2005. During this time, Michael became a devout Roman Catholic, and he would meet regularly with two priests and pray every morning pray the rosary every morning. He would also translate documents into Braille and became somewhat of a mentor to other troubled inmates. Michael even managed to sponsor a child from the Dominican Republic during this time in prison. He also spent his time in prison submitting his writings and doing interviews about what he viewed as mistreatment by the judicial system. Michael cooperated with the investigation of the murders that he committed, but he wanted his acts to be seen as what he believed that they were, an illness that he could not control. According to Michael, due to the inherent design of the judicial system, his illness would never become the forefront of the discussion, and this became the motivating factor for him to stay alive. In the final year of Michael Ross's life, he waived his right to appeal his sentence and no longer objected to his own execution despite strongly opposing the death penalty itself. A fellow graduate from Cornell University, Catherine Yeager, would state that Michael believed by this point that he had been forgiven by God and that he would be going to a better place once he was executed. Yeager would say, he's not being punished, he's moving on to life eternal. That's what's ironic about the death penalty. He's looking forward to peace. Yeager also said that Michael had come to believe that there was no way that his death sentences would be commuted, without forcing the families of his victims to suffer through even more legal hearings, and that he knew that his life would be meaningful even behind bars. She stated, he's had a horrible life, and he's wanted to do good. However, despite this, Michael Ross's lawyer, who was acting on behalf of Michael's father, Dan, was able to obtain a 2-day stay of execution. This moved his execution date to January 25th, 2005 at 2:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. However, once again, the execution would be postponed over doubts of Michael's mental competence, given that he had fought for an appeal for 17 years and then suddenly waived his right to appeal further. Michael's attorney would argue that Michael suffered from death row syndrome and was thereby incompetent to waive any appeals. Despite their efforts, however, Michael Ross was executed by lethal injection on May 13, 2005, at Osborne Correctional Institution in Somers, Connecticut. He was pronounced dead at 2:25 a.m. At the time of his execution, he was 45 years old and had refused a special last meal request and declined to make any final statements. His remains were buried at the Benedictine Grange Cemetery in Redding, Connecticut. After Michael Ross's execution, a psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Stuart Grayson, who had argued that Michael was not competent to waive his appeal, received a letter from Michael dated May 10th, 2005. So that was 3 days before its execution, which simply read, "Check and mate. You never had a chance." By the time of Michael's execution, he became the first inmate in the state of Connecticut, and all of New England, to be executed since the year 1960, and he was also the first and only inmate executed in Connecticut by lethal injection. As of June 2020, Michael remains the most recent inmate to face execution in Connecticut since the abolition of the death penalty there on April 25th of 2012. Now, that was the story of Michael Ross, the roadside strangler, as so named by that British serial killer show. The life of Michael Ross led to the death of many young women in one of the most horrible ways possible. So I'd just like to once again highlight the victims, as this story is really about them, not Michael. Zhong Nok Tu, I apologize again if I'm mispronouncing her name. Tammy Williams, Paula Pereira, Deborah Smith Taylor, Robin Dawn Stavinsky, April Brunet, Leslie Shelley, and Wendy Baribalt. All of Connecticut and the surrounding areas, New York, and yeah, the surrounding areas. I would just like to say rest in peace to all of them, and I hope that they found peace after the violent way in which their lives were taken from them. So I won't ask if you enjoyed that. Um, this was just to keep them in our memory, but I will say thank you for watching this video. Thank you for tuning in, and if you like what I do, leave a like on the video, leave a comment, tell me what you think about it. And if you want to stick around, please subscribe. I'd also like to say thank you to my patrons, and I mean, all my social media is down in the description, so you can check that out along with the sources, the source documents, and things that I use to research this case. So, once again, I'd like to say thank you all for joining me this week. I'll be back again next week, and stay safe. I love you all. Bye.